Well, hello again. I'm Joe Spino along with Avram Lapidus, and welcome to Life on the Fast Lane
Thank you.
with Truth.
It's very nice to be here.
By the way,
Yeah.
these folks better understand the reason why we're talking about Life on the Fast Lane because it was very quick to get as old as you and I,
Oh, God, yes.
isn't it? So, folks out there, remember, we've been there. We've been on that fast lane. And if I were you, I'd slow it down a little bit, wouldn't you?
You go to bed early one morning and you're young, you wake up and you're old as hell.
But look at you at the folks. Take a look at that beard. That's a classic. Avram, there's a picture behind us. It's fascinating. And can you bring it closer so the folks
I
can
will
see
in a
it? Because there's a story to it.
I just wanted to tell you, this past Friday was in Hebrew what they call Yom Hoshea. That's Day of Remembrance because of the Holocaust. So all over the world, in every single country where there's a Holocaust museum or where there's something built, art, whatever, in regards to the Holocaust, that's the day you remember the Holocaust. And people who were in the Holocaust, how can they ever forget it? But I want to call your attention to a picture
Yeah.
that was taken in
Let me hold it for you.
Jerusalem
Get in that picture, Avram. I'm sorry.
in 1971. These are my teachers, and I'm about 10 feet away from this picture. And if you'll notice on this rabbi's arm, there's a number from his being in the concentration camp. Out of the 4, he was the only one that was caught. Now, this is 1971. This picture was taken. Now, why was this picture taken in this park in Jerusalem? Go back 30 years. The year is 1941. The Germans have entered Poland, and my 4 teachers, these 4 rabbis, have a school in Poland with about 300 students. And they're hearing this story. They say, no, the Germans wouldn't do such a thing. That's crazy. But when he returned with his number on his arm, he said, yes, it's not crazy. We have to get out of here. So what's the first thing that they did? They got rid of all the 300 students to make sure they were all safe. Some went to Sweden, some went to England, some went here and some went there, but the school was empty completely. Then the 4 of them start walking down this dirt road like it's the middle of the 4th of July with not a care in the world. All of a sudden, a caravan of Nazi soldiers picks them up and takes them back to the compound. The man in charge of the Jeep walks in with these 4 men and says to the captain, should I kill them in here or should we take them outside and shoot them? And the captain says, I'll take care of it. You can go back to where you were. And the captain then turns to these 4 rabbis and said, today is your lucky day. I was a professor of architecture in Berlin, and all my students were Jewish people. I became friendly with them. They became friendly with my family. I interacted with their family. Then the war came. I was called in and I've heard stories about what we're doing. And I said, no, we're Germans. We're rational people. We don't do those kind of things. Then I happened to go to one of the camps and I saw what they were doing. And I said to myself immediately, we will never win this war. And for the rest of our lives, the German nation will be in a disgrace. So here's what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to put you in the back of my car. You lay down flat. I'm going to go to a boat. We're going to put you on the boat and get you out of here. So he takes them out the back door, puts them into the back of a truck, covers them over with a cloth, and they drive and they meet this boat. Now, the captain of the boat is not Jewish. And he says, and the captain says to these 4 men, you're going to have to shave off your beards. Because if a German patrol on the water stops you and sees you, he's going to know right away that you're Jews, and he'll kill the crew on the boat first. So they say, if that's the case, don't take us. We're not shaving off our beards. So the man on the boat says, never mind, they catch us anyway, with beards and without beards, they're going to know who they are. They'll kill us anyway. Let's take them and see what happens. So they took them, and a miracle happened. They were saved. Now, 30 years ahead, this is now 1971. They're in a park in Jerusalem because they now have a school in Jerusalem. And I'm one of their students, and I'm about 10 feet from this picture. Now, why is this picture being taken? Because in about an hour after this picture was taken, there's going to be a banquet of about 2,000 people. And who are they honoring? The captain who brought them in the truck and the man who owned the boat that brought them to the sea. But that's not the whole story. We get to the place, there's 2,000 people, Mr. Spini, you couldn't move. I mean, you couldn't even fall down. You were so packed in like sardines. And the first person who spoke was the captain that saved their lives. The next at that time, he was 94 years old. The next person that spoke was the man who owned the boat, and he's about 96 years old. But who was the third person that speaks? That was the man on the patrol who said to the captain, should I kill them here or should I kill them outside? He went to jail for 10 years for acts of, and he was released. And he said, I was sitting in prison for 10 years. And I said to myself, how could I possibly do all the things that I did? I don't know how I did it. Why I'm so ashamed of myself that no matter what you say to me, I'm sorry. And I didn't know this until many years down the road. There were people that didn't care about him apologizing. They wanted to take him outside and kill him, but they didn't. This is the story behind my 4 teachers sitting in that park in Jerusalem in 1971 and this past Friday, which was Yom HaShoah, to commemorate what happened during those years. But the thing of it is, they always say, you should always remember. Remembering isn't the answer. What is, you should never, ever forget. Because if you forget, it can happen again. And it's happening all the time. Look what happened in Cambodia. Look what's happening in Africa. People are slaughtering one another. Well, this is my story to commemorate Yom HaShoah from this past Friday. And my rabbis, may they rest in peace. This is about 30 odd years ago, never mind the 60 years ago. This is the story.
It's a wonderful story.
Is that a story or what?
It's a great story.
Can you imagine that the guy who owned the boat said, let them keep their beards, they'll kill us anyway. What the hell's the difference?
At that point, yeah.
And they said, if we have to shave our beards, we won't go on the boat.
They made a picture that won the Academy Award, didn't they? Schindler's List?
Yeah.
This is a better story.
Someday this could be a movie.
This is a better story, Avram.
I'm telling you, the most amazing, these 4 guys are walking down the road like there's not a care in the world. What's going on? They finally got rid of the 300 students and they know they got to go. And this is what happened.
Amazing. Put this back. I want to see more of you. Folks, that's life on the fast lane. That's actually what life is about.
That picture hangs in my library. And why does it hang in my library? Because anytime I have a bad day or something stupid happened in my life that really upsets me, I stare at that picture and I look at the number on the rabbi's arm. I say to myself, my day wasn't that bad.
That's a tattoo on his arm. That's the tattoo saying, I'm ready to be.
No, that was a tattoo from being in the concentration camp.
Exactly. And what they did was
they brand them like they brand cattle. And
as a commodity.
And I was once in Wyoming. And I watched a man about to take a heart spike and brand a cow. I said, don't do that. I said, well, it doesn't bother them. I said, can I say one thing? Thank God I'm not a cowboy in Wyoming, because I would never do that to my animals. I would just say, that's my cow. Bring it back to me. And that's it.
It's interesting that you bring that up. Can I tell a little story?
Of course.
In 1905, Russia went to war with Japan.
Yeah.
Japanese had just recently modernized, because in 1853, they were still a feudal state. They're the only country outside of Europe that enjoyed feudalism.
Yeah.
That system.
Okay.
Samurai warrior and all that type of stuff. So they really weren't ready to go to war against a Western power in 1905. They didn't have any money either. Money is the way you fight wars. But there was a family called the Rothschilds. You familiar with them?
Sure, of course.
And the Rothschilds were a little ticked off with the Tsar of Russia, because he had in the late 1800s, 1890s, there were things called pogroms. Would you explain to the folks what pogroms were?
They were rounding up all the Jews. They weren't allowed to own land. They were imprisoned, basically. They were starving to death, that he was making them even starve to death more. Their lives weren't 2 cents, which is why there was such a mass immigration from Russia to this country.
To this country at that time.
Including both sets of my grandparents.
as a consequence of the pogrom.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
no.
that's why I want to go to the story. So, the Rothschilds are Jewish, in
Yeah.
case you didn't know.
No, yeah.
And they said, you know what? We're going to help these Japanese out. They haven't got two nickels to rub together. So they got a phone call. They made, didn't have phones then, a cablegram, whatever, to New York. They had a family in New York, the Lowells. Does that sound right to you? And it said they were international bankers.
Jacob Lowe.
You got it. And I said, by the way, you mind ponying up $250 million, which was a ton of money back
Oh,
then,
Jesus, yeah.
to the Japanese to help them out in their effort against the Russians. You know who won that war? The Japanese. First time in history that a non-Western nation was defeated. Fast forward World War II, pre-World War II, during World War II. See, understand something. The United States did not get involved in that war until late 41, actually 42, because December 7th, 1941 was the end of the year.
Had the Japanese not bombed Pearl Harbor, they would never have gotten involved.
Exactly, which is exactly why FDR squeezed the Japanese to do exactly what they did, so he could enter the war against Germany, because he was prevented from going to war against Germany that he wanted to because of neutrality acts.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were mentioning, I know you weren't, but up in the Baltic Sea area, folks, there's three little countries: Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and they were always under the thumb of Russia. Right. And the Japanese had an envoy there. He was a senator of sorts, a Japanese senator. And the Nazis had told him to send or round up all of the Jews in the Baltic states and send them to
I
Poland.
remember that story now. He gave them false passports.
To where?
To get the hell out. Some of them went to Japan. Some even went to China.
Exactly right. They went to Shanghai.
Yeah.
Because Shanghai at that time was under Japanese control. Made them Japanese citizens.
Yeah.
And he saved.
And the first thing that they did when they got there, they built a school. They built a Jewish school. Before they even found a place to live, they built a Jewish school.
Well, let me go one step further with this, because this is fascinating. The Japanese remembered the help that they got from the Rothschilds and the Jewish community in the war against Russia. So this was like, thank you very much. So the Japanese envoy sent 250,000.
We're
not talking about nickels and dimes.
No.
To Shanghai, China, you're right, as Japanese citizens.
Yeah.
So what happens when Israel became a state? 1948, is that correct?
Yeah.
Who they commemorate? And still there in Israel is a commemoration for that Japanese.
Yeah. I can't remember his actual.
I can't either. And if anybody out there can remembers that story, it's a beautiful story. But these are the types of stories we should talk about.
The captain of is there too. They built a statue to the guy
in Israel.
Yeah.
Well, this is the thing I'm talking about. So often we forget about kindness.
Can you imagine? He said to them, "You're lucky because I was a professor of architecture.
Exactly.
Oh,
so you never know, do you?
Oh, hell no.
So life on the fast lane, sometimes there's some interesting bumps and curves on that fast lane.
They call that life.
It is called
whether
life.
It's fast or with the slow lane.
And it's a beautiful story. So is this a commemorate that Friday that you're talking about last week?
This past
is
Friday.
It World International
Basically, yes.
And when did that become established? Obviously post World War II.
Well, I think it's about maybe 20 odd years ago. What's the exact date? I don't really remember.
Now let me backtrack. So in 1971, when you were a little puppy, you were in Israel, huh?
Yeah.
As a student?
As a student, yeah.
Why were you sent there?
That's the normal thing for every Jewish student, to spend some time in Israel. Okay.
So your parents, was it your grandparents who had to flee from Russia at the time of the pogroms?
Both sets of grandparents, yeah.
It's interesting. Everybody thinks they were persecuted. I mean, today you hear about Black Lives Matter, and slavery is not a fun place to be, and no one's going to justify the institution. But a few other people have had some problems, like Jews and Japanese.
I don't think there's any race or nation in the world that at one point in time it was not their turn to be picked upon.
Well, you've had a long history of being picked upon.
Oh yeah, but we're still here. We're still here. That's the thing. We always say to people, bother us. We're still going to be here.
That's an interesting point. You also said to me that the Orthodox Jews encourage a lot of births, a lot of kids.
It's to
A
make well,
replacement.
you know, they always say that there were 6 million people killed during the Holocaust, but it wasn't 6 million. It's about maybe 30, 40, 50 million, because how many of the kids were going to come from those people who would have gotten married and had children?
That's true.
Okay,
Yeah, you're right about that.
so that's
So it's not the base number, it's the number it would have been.
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, 6 million were killed for sure, probably
Of course.
even a bit more. But I'm just saying, if you would take into consideration that some of them could have gotten married, had families, they would have been they're responsible for trying to annihilate the whole race, and they came close, but they didn't succeed.
I'd like to switch gears. It's interesting, folks. I hope you don't mind us take a trip.
Switch gears, please.
Excuse me.
Switch gears.
Not switch gears per se on the subject matter, but on the idea. In 1917, there was a Holocaust of sorts, certainly a genocide, in the Ottoman Empire.
Mm.
And I don't know if these people are aware of it, but a whole bunch of Armenian folks who come from Central Asia, and they were the large minority within the Ottoman Empire, correct? They were the Jews of the Ottoman Empire in
Yeah,
a sense,
exactly.
because they were the educated class and the movers and the
And
shakers.
to this day, Turkey still denies it ever happened.
Of course, why would they admit to the fact
No,
of that type of stuff? You know.
No.
But here's the interesting part about that. And this also happened post-World War II, and I'd like you to talk to that afterwards. A little history lesson here. The Turks, I'm sorry, the Armenians who were seeking asylum at that point in time wanted to get into the United States. And the United States had laws against folks. You had to be a Caucasian to get into the United States, the immigration laws at that point in time in history. It had to go to the Supreme Court to determine whether Armenians, in fact, were Caucasians or not.
This I did not know.
Yeah. And fortunately, they were deemed Caucasian and allowed to come to the country. Now, post-World War II, there were a number of refugee ships laden with Jews that were refused entry into the United States. Am I right or wrong?
Oh, yeah. My mother's parents, my mother was born in Montreal, Canada. They couldn't get into America. They had to go to Canada.
Okay, that's where Stop and Shop came from.
Well, that's where the store was, yeah.
And that, by the way, is not unusual. Folks don't realize how often throughout history, there was a wonderful movie that I loved, an Italian movie. Bellini was in it, Roberto Bellini, and it's called The Wonderful Life. I don't know if you ever saw it.
Oh, that is when film becomes art. That was a masterpiece.
Wasn't it?
Absolutely a masterpiece. There's no question about it. But I'm telling you, film, that makes film art.
Are you aware of the fact that Roberto Bellini is actually an Italian Jew?
Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
And that story is a very true story. It's a beautiful story.
It's unbelievably. From the time it starts to the moment it ends, there's not a boring scene in there.
And remember, there was a guy in that movie that kind of resembled the German you're talking about, the good German. There was a scene in which it was a reverse too, in which the fellow had been a professor or had been associated with Bellini in the pre-war days and would not bail him out, you know?
Yeah. Okay.
Betrayed him, kind of, right? But it was an interesting. It was such a beautiful movie. It almost brings you to tears. In fact,
Not
it
only
did.
that, but there were certain parts that make you laugh and smile.
At
That's-
both.
That's why it was in.
Yeah.
It touched every emotion.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So you agree with me on that?
Oh yeah.
If you ever get a chance, it's called The Wonderful Life. Roberto Bellini, I remember that. And the bicycle scene was one of the great scenes. It's almost like a Charlie Chaplin scene.
Yeah, but the thing of it is that he was able to tell his young child throughout the whole thing, this is just a game, to shield him from with the sad reality.
Gave his life for his son.
Yeah, he did give his life for his son.
Mhm.
But his wife in the movie, who was non-Jewish, when the train starts to pull off with her son and her husband, the German commander says, "Well, go home." I said, "Me go home. My husband and my child are on that. I want," and he stops the train and puts her on.
Mhm. That's his actual wife, by the way.
Yeah, is that right?
In real life,
Oh.
the actress is real life.
She was a beautiful girl.
Yeah,
beautiful girl.
it's such a beautiful movie. I never saw Schindler's List. Did you?
Yes, I did.
And what'd you think of it?
It was okay.
I tend to think that's right. I think it was okay.
It was okay. It was
Okay.
okay.
But it wasn't a Bellini picture.
No, God, no, not even the same category.
Tell me about Howard Walk Jewish?
Who? Herman Wolf.
Accident. Herman, I'm sorry.
Yes, absolutely.
That now that's one of my other all-time favorite books is The Exodus. And that tells a wonderful story.
That was made into a film, and unfortunately, that was a case where the book was 10,000 times better than the film.
Okay.
Paul Newman is a nice man, did not belong in that picture. Paul Newman is not a great actor by any means. He just couldn't carry it. You follow what I'm saying?
Yes. Well, he's a landsman, Paul Newman.
No, he's not.
He's
No.
not a landsman?
No, no,
I
no.
always thought he was a landsman.
His father is, his mother is not. So.
Oh, okay. Folks, that's very important.
No, listen, you can say what you want. He ain't, okay?
All right, can we, by the way,
Move on.
I love that story, and don't you ever forget it. You wrote a story almost as compelling as this, of a different nature, it's more modern. That would have been just as well as if when you're in your playwriting mode.
That might let me get some success back again after years of being dry, and this could be the next one in the lot.
Absolutely.
Because not only that, but I knew them. I was there that day.
Okay.
I mean, can you imagine the guy who owns a boat? He's not even Jewish. Probably never saw a Jew in his life, and yet he says to them, "All right, bring him. All right, we're going to get killed anyway. Doesn't matter."
Yeah.
You got to have a very interesting perspective on life to conduct oneself like that.
That person has the right perspective on life.
Okay.
So today, what we worry about.
And thank God he wasn't the only one. There were a lot of people who.
So what are you telling me? There are good people in this world, aren't there?
Of course.
And we don't accent that enough.
But the good people don't get credit.
That's right. Now I'm going to ask a question. This is a complete flip because it's been troubling me. There's been another shooting, as you know, in Minneapolis, right?
Yeah.
Outside of Minneapolis, St. Paul. And I haven't paid a heck of a lot of attention to it. But what I've noted is the exploitation of a tragedy troubles me.
But my dear boy, the news is not the news. It's a business. Newspapers are a business. You got to sell newspapers, and you got to get people to watch your news show so that you can make money and pay your employees, okay? So what do they need to do? They need to find a story that's going to catch the average slob on the street. And I don't include myself in the average slob on the street because I don't watch the news. If they didn't give the stock reports and tell me if it's going to rain tomorrow, I wouldn't watch the news at all, okay? I have it timed perfectly what time they give me the Wall Street report and what time they tell me if it's going to rain tomorrow. Then I shut it off.
But here's the thing. In some way, that whole episode would have never happened had that young man just complied with what the police were asking him to do.
That sounds good on a piece of paper, but in reality, the kid panicked. He's scared as hell. They're not more than 10 miles away from a major trial that's going on of a police officer that actually killed somebody. What's he supposed to think?
So you're empathizing. You can understand why that young man tried to get away.
Not only that, why didn't they just give the kid a ticket? He wasn't a hardened criminal.
That's a great point. Now, keep going.
He wasn't a hardened criminal. And this woman that's been on the force for so many years, she's got to go. Mistake or no mistake, it doesn't matter. She's got to go. If she doesn't,
when you say got to go, no longer a policeman or got to go to jail?
No longer a policeman.
What about jail?
That could possibly be too, but for sure, the first thing is she can never put on that outfit ever again.
Okay, keep going.
That's more than a mistake.
All right.
Okay.
So a physician that inadvertently killed somebody loses his license.
Well, that's a very hairy.
Okay, so this is not as hairy to you.
Oh, not at all. Not at all.
All right.
Because hear me out. They stopped this poor kid. This kid's got a traffic violation on the scale of life. What the hell's a traffic violation?
But isn't the issue that really took place when they looked it up that he had violated a warrant?
Because he didn't show up for court that day. They're making it sound like he killed somebody, and they told him to come in.
So you're saying most of the stuff was venial?
Nothing.
Okay.
It wasn't even worth stopping the kid. You know, police officers, and don't get me wrong, I have the highest respect for them, and they have a very dangerous job. But there's a lot of people in that outfit who aren't too bright.
Every institution you can think of has people that aren't too bright
Well,
making decisions.
okay,
And there are also bad apples everywhere.
no question about it.
But we were just telling stories of good apples, telling stories of who I would consider heroes. The police, I'm not the policeman, the German officer that said to the 4 Jews, by the way, I was a professor, get in my car. He's a hero.
Oh yeah, that's why they.
Okay, the guy on the boat is a hero.
The two of them-
Everybody in your story is a hero, a true hero.
One was 96 and one was 94 when they went.
And
to
the
Congress.
guy that was going to shoot and kill him is a hero for redemption.
He actually said, I remember, but hear me out. I didn't know this until many years down the road when they told me there were people there that wanted to take him out and kill him, but they held him back.
Okay.
He said, I sat in jail for 10 years, and I said to myself, how the hell did I do? I said, even following orders or not following orders, I should have had some kind of semblance of order. You don't do these things. It's inhuman. That's not war.
Do you know that they did an experiment once in which they directed people to use shock therapy?
Yeah, well.
And if you wanted to engender them to see how much shock they would give to a person who answered the wrong way, and to the point of a lethal shock.
Yeah.
What do you think the percentage of people that would, when ordered to do, end up pressing the button?
Probably the majority.
The highest majority, almost of universal.
All of us have that side inside.
Exactly.
Okay, but most of us keep it buried deep inside and wouldn't do it. In other words, there's a lot of people that think I can make a lot of money if I went into a bank and held the place up, but we don't do it because why? Because you don't want to go to jail.
That's exactly right, by the way. I mean, you're absolutely correct.
Okay, but
Yeah.
there are people that don't think about going to jail. They just think about getting the money.
And that's it.
Exactly.
How come the phone's ringing? It's just a call from whomever. We're not going to accept it. We're going to put it away. What else do you find in the news? Anything? You haven't been watching the news at all, huh?
Not really, no. Not really, no. What, they don't tell me anything that I want to know.
No, you said something to me that was pretty profound, actually.
What's that?
That 60 Minutes was supposed to have
the
Kamala Harris.
They have told her, and she's really pissed as hell, supposedly, to be quiet and stay in the background. We don't want to hear from you. We don't want to know, and no TV shows. 60 Minutes has scheduled to put her on TV on a major segment to discuss the trial that's going on, what her comments are.
And
apparently someone from the White House told 60 Minutes, you're not going to put her on TV, and please, thank you.
You know, folks, Avram, who I giggled at, you know, about some of your predictions about this, that, and the rest of it from your friends down in Washington, bugs in your ear. And he hasn't been wrong yet. I've been wrong on every instance, as a matter
You
of
think
fact.
they're going to get those friggin' bagels from you? But by now they're stale.
Yeah. The other one that predicted she would be the vice president. You told me Biden, long before anybody even talked about it, when everybody was ridiculing him, that he was going to be the nominee. And you also said he was going to win.
Oh, yeah.
From day one. So you predicted it all. So if you're telling me that Kamala Harris is on the outs with the powers to be.
Because they literally called her into an office. Who was in that office at the time? I really couldn't tell you the names. They said to her, you're not the president. You're not going to be the president. He's the president. And we would prefer that you keep a low profile. And she is angry as hell.
She hasn't been down to the, I mean, he did a brilliant move. I know, never consider Biden to be brilliant, but whoever pulled the trick to say to her, oh, by the way, you're now the czar of the border. I mean, that was like putting a knife in her heart. She hasn't been down anywhere near it. She was assigned to something she can't do, and she's not stayed away from it.
Do you see her on TV? Do you hear her being quoted or anything? Do you see her on the news?
No, she's nowhere.
Because they have put her in a room and locked the door.
Don't you think she's contributed to her own demise with all that giggling?
This I don't know, and I don't care, but I say this and I say this again. Had George Floyd survived, she would not be the vice president.
You're very upset about that, George Floyd. I remember that too also.
Listen.
Before it was fashionable you were laying into that cop for doing it unjustified.
It was ridiculous. Whether you like black people, you don't like black people, what's
It has nothing,
ridiculous?
it shouldn't have nothing to do with race. This stuff should have to do with humanity.
Exactly. That's unbelievable. And what happened yesterday is as bad, if not worse. A 20-year-old kid who's got a warrant because he didn't show up to court, and he's supposed to be in court because of a traffic violation. So what? I would have thrown the paper away and give the guy a ticket. Frankly, I wouldn't even stop the guy. He's in a car with his girlfriend and his child.
What is the state of law enforcement in the United States today?
They're going to need someone to come forward who is not only been a policeman for many, many years, but is also a great humanitarian and straighten everything out. So far, there's been no one to come forward.
So we're not going to get Dirty Harry.
That's an extreme.
I know it is. That's why I mentioned it.
That's an extreme.
So Dirty Harry is not coming
And
out.
to be quite frank with you, if that movie was to be made today, if that script was written today, that would not be made.
It would not be distributed, that's for sure.
Exactly.
Okay. Same thing with Death Wish. You remember that with Charles Bronson?
I was in college when that movie came out. And I'm sitting in the theater, because in college you're crazy anyway. It's about 2:00 in the morning. And I'm noticing that me and my 5 fraternity friends are in a theater with about 600 black people. And when Dirty Harry, when Charles Bronson shoots those 4 black guys, the place went crazy. The place went crazy, okay?
Yeah.
That was a great movie. That alone, well, I don't know about that one, but Clint Eastwood's films would never have been made today.
Do you recall a picture called Ninth Configuration at all?
No, but it sounds familiar.
Do you remember The Exorcist?
Yes, of course.
Well, the individual who wrote
that was Peter Blatty
from Georgetown University,
Yeah.
right? He also wrote a book called The Ninth Configuration. And the Ninth Configuration is the probability of there not being a God. In other words, to the ninth configuration is almost impossible. So he's arguing that there is a God. And the whole point, Stacy Keach, the guy with the hair lip, was in that picture. And what it was is that a lot of very high profile officers and commanders in the armed forces flip from what they see and what they've done. And when they flipped, what they didn't know what to do with them. So someone bought this big castle estate, hovered into the Sierra Nevada mountains that nobody knew about, and which they gave a psychiatric, it was a nut house for, soldiers, high-ranking soldiers that flipped. And Stacy Keach is sent there because he happened to be the #1 killer in Vietnam, hand-to-hand combat, with the Garretts and knives. This wasn't from afar. And he said, but he had flipped. Once you kill an X amount of people, your body shuts off.
Yeah.
And he goes there, and he thinks that he's a psychiatrist there. He doesn't realize he's a patient. Okay?
That's a good story.
Now, his brother is the commander psychiatrist of the whole institution. He takes on his brother's persona. And he doesn't know his brother's his brother, by the way. And he's assigned to an astronaut who completely flipped his lid, because here he is in space looking down at how fragile the Earth was, and he flipped out on it. You got it? And he's supposed to try to, and the question of, is there a God? I mean, that's, ultimately what it comes down to. Well, in one of the scenes, the astronaut escapes the compound and goes to a local honky-tonk outside of town. And as he's at the honky-tonk, these white supremacist guys types, slap you around and look down on you. And they recognize it because he was a famous astronaut. There was a chicken. So they were having a field there. Well, Stacy Keach goes to look for him to redeem him. He doesn't. Where's my patient? And he steps in, and they're violating him. And they start violating Stacy Keach. They get him down on the ground, and they're ready to urinate on him and all that type of stuff. And all of a sudden, his hand closes on the glass. The guy's holding a mug, and he flips out, and he wipes out the entire bar. Well, in that scene where he's wiping everybody out, including females, right? Exactly what you're talking about. The entire audience got up and applauded.
Oh, yeah.
There have been some great movies, by the
Oh,
way.
yeah.
Can you make them anymore?
Uh, because if you were to go before the pandemic, if you were to go to a film at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and see who's sitting there, then you know why they don't make the same kind of films anymore.
Can I get your idea on something else?
Absolutely.
Now, this is life on the fast lane, folks. Things just pop into your head, right? Because when you're going down the fast lane, you never know what's going to happen.
No question about it.
United Nations comes out and says, we should tax all the rich people in the world to pay for the pandemic. And I'm saying to myself, wait a second. If anybody's liable for the pandemic, wouldn't it be China? So why, if you want to tax somebody, if you want to penalize somebody for the pandemic that killed a lot of people, who's liable?
Well, not only that, but you know, in certain areas, in certain circles, the same people that tell me certain things also told me this, is that without a doubt, this virus was created in a Chinese laboratory and it got out.
Okay.
They didn't plan on it getting out, but it got out. They were going to use it somewhere down the road.
Well, that officer didn't plan on killing that guy, but she did. So that's the same principle.
Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. We don't know.
Well, what we do know is that the virus came from China.
No question.
And what we do know, if anybody's liable for unleashing this on the world, was the Chinese.
No question.
So why should people who happen to be rich, who have no culpability whatsoever, be penalized and pick up the tab for what the Chinese did?
Well, I think that's right.
Well, why aren't they talking that way?
Because that's not a fashionable statement.
So what we have is that we have a lot of people. I mean, why does Biden turn around and decide that we're going to tax, quote unquote, corporate America to these limits? And 95% of the CEOs who supported him saying, you can't do that, you'll kill the economy. So why is he thinking of doing it?
Well, who else is he going to?
What?
Well, there's nobody else.
There's the middle class that ends up paying for everything.
There is no more middle class.
Effectively, there isn't, is there?
Okay, there's no more middle class.
What happened to it?
It just got wiped out.
By whom?
To be frank with you, the middle class was subjected to a Holocaust.
And when would you say this began?
About 30 years ago, it started.
I believe it was probably in the 60s.
Yeah.
So that's 50 years.
Okay, excuse me. Yeah, you're right.
And I believe it had to do with folks like Lyndon Baines Johnson and Kennedy and that whole era.
Well, who do you think got us into Vietnam?
Cause what?
Who got us into Vietnam, which is one of the worst wars in the history of the world?
You tell me who got us in there.
Kennedy.
He not only, but I'm going to tell you before.
Because they came to Kennedy, the Catholic Church came to Kennedy and said, the family in Vietnam is Catholic.
That's right.
We need to preserve it. Send troops in that. That's how it started. That had nothing to do with Eisenhower.
That may be, but I will go further back than you. I would say that Franklin Delano Roosevelt is the reason for Vietnam War.
Well, you know,
his policies, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was a very, very destructive president for the United States of America. And I don't care what anybody wants to say.
And to be frank with it, was told and pleaded with him to bomb the concentration camps and the railroads that were bringing the Jews to the camps. He wouldn't do it.
There's a lot of things he wouldn't do because he's the guy that put all the Japanese in the internment camps. He's the guy that at the height of the Depression.
That, to be frank with you, that I think is a raw deal because we had never had this happen before and we panicked.
Maybe so. But, you can't cut it both ways.
Well, what can I tell you?
I'm saying that if you're talking to me that sometimes you have to do some things because of expediency, I can understand that.
Ignorance is the best.
Ignorance, yeah, I can understand. But that's not the issue. Here's what the guy did. You have the height of the Depression. People are starving to death in the United States, right, in the 30s. They turn around and they slaughter tons and tons of cattle and pork, and they burn all types of fields of corn and the rest of it in order to keep the price, the commodities up, keep the price of oil crash in the market, okay? So what's that all about? That's all about preservation of power as opposed to what's the best interest of the people.
Well, what's so unusual about that? That's not a new thing.
No, I know, but he put it on steroids. That's what I'm saying. He created the social welfare state in the United States of America. He created the nanny state. He copied everything that Otto von Bismarck before him. Okay? And you know what? You know who was even more threatening than him?
Who was that?
Huey Long, who was his competitor from Louisiana, the Kingfish. They assassinated him. He was going to run against Roosevelt.
Yeah.
And what did Huey Long say? That every idea he had, he was a populist. He said every idea he had was stolen by FDR. And there's a lot of truth to that. So when we look at reality and history and perception, there's a huge disconnect here. Anybody that tries to tell me that Barack Obama was an intelligent man and a competent president doesn't know what they're talking about.
They'll be studying for years how he got into the office in the first place.
Look, I never particularly liked Richard Nixon. He was anything but a conservative. He was a big states guy. He liked government. I mean, people forget he put on, wage and price controls. Remember? I mean, he was the guy that came up with Medicare. If anybody wants to think about it, this guy and revenue sharing. He loved big government. He's a big government guy. Now, they knock him, but effectively,
he was a good president, no question.
Yeah.
He was a very good president.
He was a very smart, intelligent man.
He was very good to Israel, too.
He's the guy that, we could argue that our competition with China today is a direct result of him and his buddy, Henry Kissinger. They're the ones that opened up China.
Strangely enough, you don't hear a word from Henry anymore. Henry was no damn good, believe me.
No, you never said much. You weren't too happy about him.
Never liked the man.
No. But I'm not a fan of Richard Nixon, but give him his due. There's a couple of guys that get overstated. For example, Truman wasn't that good. They make him out to be the greatest, but he wasn't that good.
To be frank with you, I think he was the best president.
You do?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, go ahead.
And most Jewish people will say because he made the state of Israel.
Okay, I'm listening.
Okay. He was a very pragmatic person and a very honorable person.
He was honorable.
And did a very good job.
He was honorable. He never owned a house.
The first time he and his wife had their own place to live was when he moved into the White House.
Exactly.
And I'll tell you what happened. You know how Israel became a state? A true story? This is exactly.
I like your stories.
When he got out of the army, his best friend was a Jewish boy, and they went into business together. They opened up a haberdashery store, men's haberdashery store.
Tell them what a haberdashery means. Do you think they know today?
That's men's suits and ties and all kinds
hats,
of hats,
yeah,
the whole kit and caboodle.
Yeah, okay.
And Harry was a good politician and a good soldier, but he wasn't a good businessman, and they went broke. But here's what bothered the hell out of him. His mother-in-law was an anti-Semite, big time.
Yes, she was.
And he could never bring his best friend into the house for a meal, and it bothered him greatly. Well, he's now the president of the United States, and they're honking on the horn that they want him to talk to Chaim Weizmann, the president of Israel, to talk about things, and he won't talk to him. His friend Bernie calls him on the phone, and he says to Bernie, all the years I've known you, Bernie, you never asked me for a thing. What do you want? He says, I want you to talk to Chaim Weizmann. He said, okay.
That's it?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
That's a great story.
All because his mother-in-law wouldn't let a Jew in the house. And his father-in-law, who was a big banker, found out some shady stuff. He committed suicide.
That's right. You're right about that.
Okay.
Do you know who his Baba was?
Who his barber was?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
You don't know who his Baba was?
Who was his barber?
Spina. Dominic Spina.
Oh,
I'm serious.
Oh, right, fine, but excuse me, okay? That's not something that's in National Archives, okay?
Well, the funny feature is I read his biography. In fact, I have it here. I should give it to you, but
I read it.
Oh, so you read the same one? And you missed the part about Spina?
And my family loved Harry Truman. My grandfather thought that he was the next thing below God.
That was Manchester's book, wasn't it?
I don't remember.
I thought you read the book.
I got it in my, I'll bring it to you the next week. When I
We don't have to do that. I'll take your word for it. It was a great book, wasn't it?
It was unbelievable. He was without a doubt the best president we ever had.
That's what you say.
The best story I know about Harry Truman was besides that, his daughter was trying to become an opera singer.
She couldn't sing.
Well, okay, but he got her into the Met.
Yeah.
We called the phone. I'm up with her, so she gets a job at the Met, and they let her sing a little chorus by herself. And this newspaper reporter gave her the most savage review.
I remember this.
I mean, disgusting. He went overboard. So Harry Truman, this is a famous story, calls him on the phone, and he cursed him out for 50 minutes in language that even Satan would have shut his ears.
He was a pretty good poker player, by the way.
This I don't know.
Yeah, he was a poker player.
Okay, but he was a great president, and
He was a good president. I think he was
because of
overrated.
his partner Bernie. I can't remember Bernie's last name.
Schwartz.
No, Goals. I can't remember. That's how Israel became a state.
My disillusionment with Harry S. came when he suckered my boy, General Douglas MacArthur at Wake Forest.
That was probably the only thing that he did that he shouldn't have done.
Oh, you finally agree with me on something?
No, really. MacArthur was a true general in every sense of the word, and his men loved him. Okay.
He had the formula. He defeated the North Koreans pretty easily.
He should have gone all the way in, but
he wanted to,
but they wouldn't let him.
They sucked. That's where they sucked on him at Wake Forest and gave the excuse. They sandbagged him at Wake Forest conference and got rid of him. And plus, they were worried about him becoming president of the United States at that time. The Filipinos loved him. The Japanese loved him even more.
They respected him.
Exactly. That's the better word. That's the funny thing. I think General MacArthur was respected by more people than necessarily
the
loved.
thing of it is, he's when they came to Harry Truman and they said, we have to drop a nuclear bomb on Japan. Truman said no. They had to come back about 6 times to people. He said, look, these people will never surrender. We will lose another 1 million men before they come to, and even after the first bomb, they still wouldn't come to it took 2 of them. It took 2 atomic bombs for them to finally realize we got to do something. They have no word in their vocabulary for the word surrender.
Let me go back in history, folks.
Okay.
Yeah, I hear you. In case you didn't understand this, the Soviet Union at that time, not Russia, Soviet Union, never declared war on Japan until the very end.
After we had done all the work.
After we dropped the atom bombs and stuff. And in so doing, when it was over, by declaring war, this is why it's happened at Yalta. It's why I'm not particularly fond of FDR. As a consequence of that gave the Soviet Union entry into North Vietnam, Korea, and all of that stuff, and they took all of the northern islands from the Japanese, the Sakhalin Islands and stuff like that. And that has been a legacy into the 21st century. When you talk about the Korean War, everything for every third law of physics, Sir Isaac Newton, for every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction.
Yeah.
And all these things are interrelated. And I give Harry S. Truman a lot of credit on this regard. FDR kept him in the dark. Harry S. Truman had not a clue about anything, didn't know about the Manhattan Project. They kept him in the dark. They gave him no respect. He did a marvelous job given the handicap that he was given by FDR in the transition, okay? So for that, I give him a world of credit. I also give him a world of credit for beating a guy who I think would have been a disaster, which is, Dewey. Dewey had about as much business to be president of the United States. And when I loved his slogan, can you trust a man with a mustache? Why are you smiling? What was he alluding to? Adolf Hitler.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that was a subliminal message, which was a great ad at the time. What was the famous ad from the 1950 election? Do you remember that one?
Dewey wins.
No, 1950 was I like Ike.
I like Ike.
Everybody said I like Ike. Now, was he a likable guy? I don't know.
I don't know either. To be frank with you, he's one of the few people who made it to the presidency that you don't know that much about at all.
Except for a couple of things. He did the interstate highway system, that was his, and the St. Lawrence Seaway. These are critical things, but that was from a military perspective.
He did the highway system. Probably someone told him to do the highway system.
Because he noticed that the Germans, that's how they moved their, you could land airplanes on their highways.
I've actually been to Germany.
Yeah, exactly. Moving troops around. And
Jesus,
stuff.
those roads, it takes a half an hour to cross the street.
Exactly. So, I mean, and Germany, but folks, Germany, United Germany is about the size of Texas, probably smaller geographically in size. So when people talk about these nations of Europe, they don't realize they're about as big as our big states.
Oh, yeah. And they don't do much, but they talk a lot.
They certainly do. And they like to, we know we're moving up. Why do our shows move so fastly? Is it Life on the Fast Lane that does it or what?
Possibly, yes.
Let's summarize this story again.
I'm looking at that picture, and this is 1971, and I can't believe I'm 10 feet from them. At the same time, I'm telling you, you can see it. I don't know if you can see it at home. There's a number right on his arm, like you brand cattle. That's what they did. You just like branding cattle. They saw us as not even human.
Does anybody know how that all happened? How we're able to herd a whole bunch of people and mass murder, basically, an efficient way of culling the population? Isn't that? I mean, this is how these intellectuals thought. Yeah, remember that guy Bernard Shaw,
Yeah,
and the eugenicist of the late 19th century.
George Bernard Shaw.
He was a eugenicist, yeah.
Mm.
Margaret Sanger, the one who came up with the Planned Parenthood and abortion, all that stuff. What was their whole intent? To cull the population. You see what happened during the Industrial Revolution, up until the Industrial Revolution, the population of the world was stable.
Well, look what the Chinese have done. Only one child per family.
Well, Avram, when my daddy was born, my father, we're talking about, when he was born, the entire world had less than 1 billion people.
If I wasn't Jewish, I would sell off everything and move to Italy and buy myself a really nice apartment, take my dog with me, meet a couple of good-looking girls, maybe open up a restaurant, do something. I'd enjoy myself. But when you're Jewish, it comes with a responsibility. You have to be humanistic, and you have to try to see to it that things become better.
Is that the excuse?
Basically,
You
yes.
buy that?
Yes, I do.
Have you convinced yourself of that yet?
It's true.
The point being is that in the late 19th century, they were worried about this explosion as a consequence of the Industrial Revolution, where boy meets girl, city urban life. I mean, that's a multiplier. You follow me? And so these great thinkers started thinking about limits. And how do we cull a population?
What qualifies someone as a great thinker?
Well, self-described. They think that they're thinkers. I mean, do you know an intellectual that doesn't think they're an intellectual? The ones who are intellectual don't think they're intellectual.
I don't think I know any intellectuals.
You'll bet your life you don't. They don't like you.
I don't care.
You know why they don't like you?
Why?
Because you can think. You're a threat to them. Anybody can think, it's a threat. Let me give you here, folks, this is our closing thing. Here is my philosophy or my thought.
This is your philosophy.
This is it.
Let me hear your
in a nutshell.
Let me hear your philosophy.
If you ask a child, not an infant, but a child, pre-7 years old, to draw a picture of Avram Zapitas, that kid will draw an exact portrait of you, unedited. If you have a smile on your face, you'll have a smile on your face. If you have a frown, you'll have a frown. They don't know how to edit. They don't. They're very honest. Then they go to school. And they find out that if they take that frown and they twist it a little bit and make it look more like a smile, they get a cookie.
Well, let me tell you, that's your philosophy?
Hold it. I haven't finished. Do you mind?
Excuse me.
And as you go through school, you learn to edit. When you become in the PhD class, you've edited so much, you have no idea what the truth is.
All right, now can I tell you my
It
philosophy?
is. No, it's not your turn.
If you were to give every single person in the world a free bagel, you know what they would say? Why is there no cream cheese?
With chive.
Okay, okay. You see, you never know what you have until you don't have it anymore. Or basically, better way to say is, you never know exactly what you have until you see in someone else what they do not have.
So you had to one up me again?
Yeah, sorry.
I still owe you for the bagel.
It's over and done with. By now, those
You didn't remind me about
those
the,
bagels are stale. Okay. Those bagels are hot as rocks right now. I break my friggin' teeth on them. Okay.
tell the folks until,
Shalom. Good night. See you next week.
have a great one. Well, what would you think?
I don't know.